Morning, everybody. I don't have a video that cool for you, but I do have a video for you. We'll get to it in a little bit. You guys have been blessed the last couple of weeks, I hear. Not I hear, but I know. You've had one of my favorite people and my favorite preachers, actually, of all time here on the pulpit. We were actually quite surprised that we got to be here back to back. Yeah, Pastor Austin's pretty close to my heart. I won't do as good a job as he did. I'll just make that clear right now, so please set the expectations standard. I'm not a preacher, I'm a missionary. We serve full-time right here in Elkhart. We don't come from here. I'll let you guess by the accent where we do come from. We'll have a quiz later. There's no prizes. We work at a place called Sunset Solutions. Has anybody heard of this place? Yeah, so it's a mission right on the south side of Elkhart, Indiana. And we're a technology ministry primarily. We build technology to help people in the developing world and basically all around the world reach a greater population than they could. There's lots of pastors out there that have a heart for their own people. There's lots of ministries that have a heart to do things, but they don't necessarily have the technology they need to do those things. And so I'm an engineer, I'm a computer engineer, and I sit here in a cubicle for much of the year, and part of the year I spend the time overseas. And so we build devices for things like that. It's really hard to find a ministry like this. There's only one or two in the world. So I feel quite blessed to have got here and quite surprised, actually, to have ended up living in Elkhart, Indiana. I'll tell you, when I was growing up, it wasn't on my radar. Nor was Goshen, nor was South Bend. Well, maybe South Bend. I mean, they've got Notre Dame and stuff like that, right? But you might ask how we came upon that mission, and I'd love to tell you. But really, these days, the internet is so good, right? The internet's just got so many incredible things on it. And so all you really have to do, if you want to do this, you go to www.findmycalling.com, you type in a little bit of information about yourself, and then it pops up a video that matches you to where you're supposed to be. And it's really God's word coming through the internet. That's a total lie. But if it wasn't, the video they send you might look like this. Pam, if you could play that.
Long-term missions assignment generator booting up. Ready, please wait for scanning and assignment. Scanning Tom Scatliff, education, computer engineer, geek quotient 87.3%. Scanning Candice Scatliff, education, bachelor's degree in human ecology and a master's in nutrition, desire to heal the world, rated at 91.2%. Scanning the Scatliff boys, education, major in cardboard construction and minor in sandbox technology. Skills, Jonathan and Matthew read, write, and arithmetic. The new guy's skills are yet to be determined. Cuteness factor outside of measurable range. Processing. Assignment, Candice is best suited to provide nutrition consultation to national ministries. Tom's geek quotient means that creating technology is his only possible fit. The system has a 98.5 plus or minus 1.5% confidence interval in this assessment, so get to work.
So obviously that's a little tongue-in-cheek, but
long-term missions assignment.
It's actually relatively accurate. We didn't do that. Our route into missions was a little bit more circuitous than that. I grew up actually in the Catholic Church. I was going to be, from about the age of 4, I decided I was going to be a Catholic priest. And that was where I was headed. And I was pretty solidly set on that. As it went along, though, I found I had more gifts for engineering and technology than I did for actual ministry. I went through engineering because I couldn't find anything else that would accept me. And I got through there and ended up being a rehab engineer. So I worked in a hospital working with people with disabilities. and we'd make things that improved their quality of life. We did a lot of work with power wheelchairs. We did a lot of work with computer access for people who had quadriplegia or MS or even Parkinson's, and ways for people to communicate when they couldn't on their own. It was good work. But one of the things that I look back on and say, although it was good work, I'm pretty sure it had no eternal value in heaven. And the question is why? And I think we know that the answer is that good work done for ourselves isn't really have any eternal value, right? That I didn't know the Lord. I knew me, right? And a good job like that, where you get to interact with people, it gives you those warm fuzzies when you go to work. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a gift from the Lord. But if that's what we're doing it for, then we're falling short. And so I started coming to that realization, even though I didn't quite know why, that all this work that I'd been doing was kind of a house built on sand, right? That the water was just kind of flowing through it and tearing it away. At the same problem, too, I started realizing that I had these sin problems that I just couldn't deal with. I still deal with sin, right? Who doesn't? But one of the things that I really struggled with was that it was kind of hopeless. That you sit and you stew in your sin, and you look around and you're like, how am I ever going to get out of this? Right? And so you try on your own power and you fail. You try on your own power and you fail. You try on your own power and you fail. And you do everything short of just giving up. And so that's where I was. So I figured I better change my life around. I was 30 years old and I wasn't married, and I figured that's an easy thing to fix. All I got to do is find a good woman, right? And so I made this list of what I would be looking for in a good woman. I can't remember all of them. One of them was Christian. I'm pretty sure one of them was good looking. I mean, this is where my head was at, right? And so I started looking for that. I'm like, okay, where am I going to find a good woman? Because and I thought, well, a good woman is probably going to volunteer somewhere good, like a counseling program or a food bank, right? And so I was kind of dabbling in a master's degree at the time, and so I signed up for the university food bank, and I met my boss, and I fell in love immediately. And so I thought, well, now I've found one. I've just got to convince her to go out with me, because I really liked Candace. I liked a lot about her, but one of the things I didn't like is that she didn't want to have anything to do with me at all. She actually tried to fire me a couple of times, at least once, and it didn't take. But one of the things that I was looking for too was somebody who was Catholic. I thought that was important to my faith practice, and and both my sides of the family, I got 30 cousins on each side. They're all Catholic. All my uncles and aunts, they're all Catholic. Everybody I grew up with went to a Catholic school. When I went to sleep at night, I slept in Catholic pajamas. Like that's just where it was. And so that was something that was really important to me. And she was a brand new Christian. She had come from a family with no real faith practice at all. I mean, not even Christmas and Easter. The occasional time maybe, but it just wasn't there. And she had recently found the Lord, actually, through a precursor to a Franklin Graham crusade. And she was pretty on fire for the Lord. And I thought, well, that's good. At least she knows about faith. I mean, Catholics are Christians too in a lot of ways, right? I knew that there was a God, and I knew that there was a Christ. I knew that He created the universe. And I thought, well, this is a good start. But all I have to do then is just move her into the Catholic Church and just teach her a few basic tenets of faith, and this will work out. But I better figure what her church is teaching her, right? And so I showed up at her church just to kind of feel it out, and it was kind of funny because all they really did, and this was a dirty trick, all they really did was preach the gospel. That's all they did. They went to the Bible and they preached out of that. And it's like, even as a Catholic, that you can't argue with the Bible, right? And so it's like, okay, so what am I going to do here? And so we started having these discussions instead. And so she would ask me some of the finer points of faith that I was happy to get into, like, why do you believe that communion is really the body and blood of Christ instead of just kind of a representation? Why do you, when you sin, why do you go to a priest instead of talking to God when the Bible says you can go to God? The only stipulation was that my answers had to come from the Bible. And that's when things started falling apart. That I just found that my faith was indefensible. The faith I had grown up with, the faith that I had been taught, I just couldn't defend. without going to things like tradition or without going to a book that, that led me in a circle. And so that started unraveling a little bit, and that's a hard thing when your whole culture is one way, right? When your whole culture is one way, and then all of a sudden the underpinnings, you realize that they're sand too. So not just my life and the good work that I was trying to do, but also the faith practice I had, the way I thought I was going to get to heaven one day, all these good works that I was piling up for salvation, right? Sand. Sand, dust. That's a hard place to come to. So with my faith practice broken, and all of a sudden this nagging extra conviction of sin in my life, right? I had always known it was there. I'd always tried to deal with it and never really could. But all of a sudden realizing that I have to, and still not knowing how. I can look back and say that this is the Spirit working in my life very clearly. And it was over a very short period of time. From the time I first met Candace and she tried to fire me, till the time I asked her out the first time was about, maybe 100 days. And the first time I asked her out, she didn't say no. But she said, if you're only going to ask me once, let this not be the time. 4 days later, we were engaged. I have no idea how that happened, except that I know exactly how that happened. It had nothing to do with me. It was God just saying, okay, you need a little spark in your life here, so I'm just going to make this happen for you, okay? Just step back and watch. So I did, and we got engaged, and all of a sudden, life was happening, right? It wasn't just me anymore living my life as a 30-year-old single guy, right? I had people that I knew and loved. I had a future that was changing, and all of a sudden, I figured I better start getting my act together, and then just again realized I couldn't. And because of that, in the middle of this whole thing, my life, God did a wonder, and He just started pulling it apart, right? Dropping off things left and right. I was in a master's degree, like I said, but I came to the realization that I was never going to finish that thing. Especially not with better things to do now. It's like I'd invested years in that, and my thesis advisors, I'd worked with them, and they had invested years in me too, and I had to go to them and say, you know what, this just isn't going to happen. Yeah, we know. We've known this for a while. So all of a sudden, this is a part of my identity that gets taken away. That same day, I went back to my, right after that meeting, I went back to my office, and my boss said, hey, when you get a chance, come by my office. I'm like, okay. And to make the story short, she offered me an opportunity to resign right there and then. I'd had that job for 8 years. I wasn't a good employee. I can get into the whys and hows of it, but in about the course of an hour, everything that I had, all those good works that I thought I was doing, all those things that I thought I was saving up, I realized, again, just sand. Just turn to vapor in a second, right? Hard time. And so you start looking around to figure out what is solid here, right? It's like if you're drowning in an ocean, you're looking like, what can I grab onto? Is there a piece of floating log? Is there some sort of island I can get to? Is there a rock that I can put my feet on? And sure enough, there is, right? If you don't know that rock, you got to find it. There is a rock who will always be with you, who will always walk with you, who will always carry you, and will always be beside you even if you're drowning, literally or not. And so I remember breaking down, not literally, maybe, but on the side of the road, I was driving my car, and it was late at night, dark and stormy night, classic stuff, right? And I just burst into tears, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. But I knew. And I just said, God, I know I'm making a mess of this. There's nothing that I'm doing that has eternal value. And I knew that that's what I needed, was something with eternal value. I knew that's what we were living for. I had that conviction. I just had no idea how to get there. No idea how. And so I just said, God, if you can rescue this situation, go ahead, because I can't. Take what you need. Take my life and do with it what you can. And although nothing fixed itself right away, definitely found a peace. So Candace, we were engaged at the time, and she's a lot smarter than I am, and she's probably more talented too. And so she had this scholarship, right? And it was basically to anywhere in oh, give it away, anywhere in my home country that you wanted to go, she could go. It's a full ride. And so she had picked this city that's not too big, not too small, although I hear you guys don't understand that rhyme anyway. Just the size of Montreal is the rest of that rhyme. And so she ended up doing her master's degree there. But we both, I mean, she is a new Christian and me as a new Christian, both had this sense that, whoa, do you see the difference that God makes in your life? Like, how can you not tell people about that? And so we had this heart, we got to get into missions or something like that. We had never seen a missionary presentation. We had never met a missionary, but we're like, somebody has to tell somebody, right? I mean, in the group I grew up in, it was all the priests that all did this stuff. And I wasn't going to be that anymore, obviously. A, I was married, and B, I didn't believe it. And so those are two strikes against me for sure. And then she too, I mean, she can talk about how God intersected her life. And so we just said, well, let's figure out what we're supposed to do with this, right? So let's look at who we are. Let's look at our loves, at our heart, at our skills and our abilities, and what God's invested in us. And maybe that's pointing us to where we're supposed to go. And so, like I said, I was an engineer. I had these things with people with disabilities that I was working on. She grew up a farm kid. She had a degree, a master's degree in nutrition. And so we started looking around, and there's this place in Costa Rica that we saw. And they were housing people with disabilities that they'd pulled out of the jungle. These people that couldn't survive there. And they're teaching them how microagriculture and how to farm, and they needed help with their wheelchairs. And we thought, this is perfect professional skills. We go down there, and we get down there, and we thought, God has prepared us for this. This is awesome, right? You start looking at how God set this all up ahead of time. And we get there, and like a week before we go, they're like, the government came. And they said, we can't be a church and a hospice at the same time. And so we either had to pick whether to be a church or whether to support these people with disabilities. And so they said, so we found a better home for them. And we'll support them that way. And we're like, well, we're still coming. What are we supposed to do? And so they made us youth pastors, which is just kind of this ironic thing because we'd never met a youth pastor. We didn't even really like youth. And I'm not saying that meanly. We just had no understanding. And we're like, how are we possibly prepared for this? And they said, you're actually uniquely prepared for this. You guys are strange enough that God's made you strange enough that these kids are going to come just out of curiosity. And we're like, that's the preparation? Yes, that was preparation. And they did. And we got blessed and blessed and blessed by that whole experience. It was ridiculous. But after a while of that, we're like, okay, God, how about our professional skills now? How about we start using those? So we started looking around, and we end up with an organization that we looked at called HCJB. I'm not sure if you guys have heard them. But they've been broadcasting out of Ecuador since the 1920s. They were broadcasting into Russia during the Cold War with more power than Russia knew how to jam. So they're in the gospel all over the world from there, and that was something that I thought I can do. They had hospitals and Candace could plug into, and we thought, this is awesome. And so we went down there, we took a look around, we're in Shell, Ecuador, and we thought, this is amazing. This is a great organization, we can really fit in here, use our professional skills. We came back with Jonathan on board, and then we started thinking about this support raising thing, right? And this is a really daunting thing for missionaries. And we're like, what are we supposed to do here? Like, this is really difficult. But also, like, where are we supposed to be? This is a big organization that's got a worldwide footprint. Let's see where we can plug in. And they kept presenting us opportunity after opportunity. Well, what about this? What about that? What about going to North Africa, Middle East, and smuggling audio? And I'm like, well, that sounds cool, but it didn't hold. And they're like, And after a while, we just, I'm not sure if we fell off track, but we just really felt like we weren't really following our calling. We were looking for this calling. We were looking for this voice from the Lord that just said, this is it, right? And it wasn't coming. And so we thought, I guess that's it. I guess we heard wrong. I guess we thought wrong. I was working in industry, and I had a good job. Candace was working she'd finished off her master's degree at the time, and she was working with a diet dispensary, like basically a food bank. And so we were like, what are we supposed to do? And so I started thinking about things that I'd love to do. I thought, these are things that are in my heart. Electronics, right? How many people love electronics, right? Anyway, clean water has always spoken to me. I thought, I love clean water. I'd love to be in that kind of area. Alternative energy, like solar panels and wind power. I thought, this is really cool stuff. I did a lot of software development, and I didn't want to give that up. And we always had this heart for international travel, and we thought, maybe God, can send us around the world through some sort of job. Candace had a pretty, well, not so similar list, but, she wanted to work in international nutrition. She wasn't so much worried about here as making sure those people with zero resources had what they needed to survive and feed their children. These low resources communities, these techniques of sustainable agriculture, and it's like, where are you supposed to find a job like that? And so I actually took a leave from work, and we decided we're going to pack up and we're going to travel back to our hometown from where we were, and we're going to try to figure out if God's going to lead us to where we're supposed to be, right? Kind of that fleece idea. And so our eyes were set on our hometown, and the first stop we made was at the president of the organization's house, and we said, Ian, we love you, we love the organization, we really thought we'd fit here, but it's just not going to happen. And so we resigned. We're like, we just don't hear our calling. And he's like, I understand. He's like, it's too bad you didn't get down to Elkhart, Indiana. He says, I think you would have really liked that place. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But we had already made up our mind. And so I went down and I got on the map, because it was still paper back then. And I tried to figure out with my fingers how far we could get from where we were to our hometown with a 9-month-old in the car. And where did this drop us? Right here. And I thought, well, that's kind of a message. I should probably not ignore that one. So I went back up to Ian and I said, Ian, you think you could make a couple of calls and maybe we could actually get a tour of that place in Elkhart? And so the next day, well, a couple days later actually, we showed up at Sunset Solutions, which was then called the HCGB Global Technology Center, which is quite a mouthful. If you guys know the place, you know where Crown is, down on Mishawaka Road in 17th. So Crown basically gave us our building. And so we're right there. The founder of Crown brought us up here, and that center started in 1986. And the idea is that they want to build this technology for abundant life. They want to help people reach their own people with technology, the technology they can't do. And so we design and build it from scratch. And so I got there and I started looking around. And the first place they took me was this electronics shop, and I'm like, I'm going to pull out my list. Check, right? And then start walking me through the next sandbox, and they're working on clean water solutions, trying to figure out how we can get some satellite monitors. Just out of surprise, they kind of look like this. Okay? So a little box like this that'll sit on a unit. Sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're bigger. And this thing, they told me this thing would be able to monitor a hand pump and tell us within a few hours whether or not that pump was working, even if it was in the middle of the jungle or middle of the desert. And so you can fix these. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. And they said, yeah, we're trying to hook these up to solar panels and wind and stuff like that to keep them powered. I'm like, alternative energy. Oh my, check. This is getting tough. And so then they're like, but do you have any love for software development? I'm like, well, actually, that's an odd question, but yes, I do. And they said, and do you mind traveling internationally every once in a while? Because we've got, we service, 160 different ministries in 100 different countries a year. Is that something you'd be willing to travel to go see? And I'm like, I'm in. And I thought, all my list is checked off. The only thing I have to do is break it to Candace that we're moving to the Midwest. Because we had no idea that was even on the radar. As it so happened, I'm not sure how that happened, but I got into the car, and it was kind of a quiet ride for a little bit. I was just trying to pick my words carefully, and she looked at me and she said, I'm not sure how to tell you, but this is where we got to be. I'm like, how do you know? Like, you didn't see any of those things I saw. She was off at Once Upon a Child and stuff like that while I was off at, while I was doing the tour. So God was very gracious and merciful to us. And so we've been there 8 years doing exactly what we love. Like, like everything that I'd written down on my heart is fulfilled in my day-to-day job. It's ridiculous. I don't know how I get that. Every skill I've ever learned, I get to put to use. Candace works there too. I know it's a technology place, and she's in nutrition, but they've said, come on and join us. So we actually split our week, and she works in various ministries, and she supports them overseas. We've got some sustainable gardening projects going on in Congo right now. She's consulted in Peru and Haiti, and in Dominican, India, a few other places like that, working with exactly these low-resource communities that she's got a heart for, and doing the international travel. We actually get to travel as a family, which I would never get in industry. And so we spend, 3 months, in Congo or something like that, and we get to go there together. It's just ridiculous how how good God was. And so I just want to look at, instead of listening to me, I want to look at the Bible for a second, right? Because this is where we get our truth from. So I'm going to go to Ephesians 2, 8, and 10. You guys probably, 8, 2, 10, you guys probably know this. This is from your Pew Bible. It's page 18, 19 if you want to follow along. I'm going to start in verse 8. You guys know this part of the verse, I'm sure. For it is grace you have been saved through faith, right? This is an experience that was definitely real to us. Not by works so that no one can boast, right? And there was my old thought and my new thought, just coming into conflict in half a sentence, if I had only looked ahead of time. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God has prepared in advance for us to do. Isn't that amazing? God at the beginning of time had already figured out all these good works that I got to do. And he had prepared them for me to just walk into. And they weren't good works for me, they were good works for him and his kingdom. I want to look at Romans 12 as well. Let's go to verse 6. So that's the top of page 1764. So Romans 12, verse 6, he says, we have different gifts. I mean, that's true, right? I mean, maybe your gifts are the same as mine. Maybe they're different. According to the grace given to us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. My gift isn't prophesying. Not many of us have that one. But then after that, thankfully, the list gets a lot easier to achieve, right? If it's serving, let him serve, right? I think we all have an ability to do that. If it's teaching, let him teach. If it's encouraging, let him encourage. If it's contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. If it's leadership, let him govern diligently. If it's showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully. Right? Isn't this amazing stuff? I mean, maybe what moves my heart moves your heart too, right? Maybe that's the kind of ministry that you love. Maybe you'd be really cool to think about some of these other things. I'll show you them now, and you can see them after. But we're trying to get the gospel out there to the world. And if you can imagine that probably like 90%, this is how I wake up in the morning, right? I think like 90-something% of the world has the gospel in their head right now in a language that they can understand. The only problem is that it's in radio wave format, which we can't decode very easily, right? And so what do? We produce radios like this. This is one of my prototypes, so you can actually touch it, and if you want to, you won't break yourself. It's not powered. But the idea is that, I don't know how to preach the gospel in their language, right? I can't do what these apostles did, right? I don't have tongues that I can speak in. But I can speak in software languages, and I can make this little black chip there speak in their heart language to them the whole gospel. What a cool idea that God's empowered us to do that. Here's a well monitor. This one would sit on top of an India Mark II. This is the world's most popular well. It doesn't look like much. It just replaces the standard cover. But it's got a satellite modem that sends a message up once a day. This means that we can often send our partners in to fix the wells when they break before the village community can actually come out and tell us that it's broken. If you're trying to put a well into a community to build a relationship with them, imagine how that is when their well breaks and the next day you show up on their doorstep and they didn't even have a chance to tell you that it was broken. These are the kinds of things that we want to support our partners with, right? And this is all technology, And to that end, too, we say, okay, well, radio technology is good, but what if you got radio you want to put on? So actually from scratch, we designed things like this. You guys can take a look at that later. But this is a full radio transmitter. This one's about 10 watts. It would probably cover this building and maybe this block. But we scale from 10 watts all the way up to 500,000 watts. So 500,000 watts will get you 2/3 of the way around the world with 2 bounces off the sky. Like they're so powerful, you need to build your own hydroelectric power dam to power the thing. And we've done, right out of our center right here in Elkhart, we've done the whole gamut of those. And we continue to support, in the order of 160 ministries a year around the world doing these very things, right? This is technology, right? This is my bread and butter. This is what I get to do. This is what I love to do. And I always wondered how God's going to use this for eternal value, and He's shown me, right? I mean, and so maybe this is something that you guys want to be part of too. And if that's the case, consider joining our support team, right? And share that work with us and share that joy. If nothing else, grab one of the prayer cards that we've got and talk to us about it. Because, I'll talk all day about that, but I'm going to stop myself now because we've got a few minutes left, and I would really like to talk to you about someone else that's close to my heart, go-karts, right? Do you guys love go-karts? These little engine things, right? Yeah, little 6, 7 horsepower things. I love go-karts. We never had one. I always wanted one for my boys. So a friend of ours gave us one. And the thing is, I'm not very good at go-karts. I'm not very good at small engine repair. It's kind of a new skill for me. And so Jay and I had to go to the books and figure out how to get this thing to start. First of all, we realized that we were trying to use the air feed as our fuel line. And that doesn't work very well. And then the carburetor was all gummed up, and Jay can tell you how he fixed that up. And had to learn a lot to get this thing going, but eventually we had this little putt-putt thing going around the block. It felt pretty good. And so we thought, well, okay. And so I told the lady who had given it to us, and she's like, actually, I've got another one. It's broken too. And so we worked on that for a little while and got that going. And then I started feeling a little bit confident. And so the neighbor across the street had given me this old generator. And he says, it's not running very well. And I'm like, well, okay. So we tackled that one, eventually figured that one out too. And it's like, well, this isn't so bad. An old friend had given us a pressure washer that wasn't working. I had all this junk sitting around the house, but it's like now it's starting to actually be useful. I'm getting away from go-karts here, I know, but it's okay. And so we got this pressure washer working, and I'm like, well, this is pretty cool, right? And then Scott says, he's sitting in the back, it was a rear tiller, and the engine wasn't working very well. And so I was feeling pretty confident at times. Let me come over and help you with that. I've had some pretty good success recently, right? His was very different. It didn't fix quite as easily as the other ones did. But one thing is he showed me how to adjust the air idle screw, right? We had a manual that actually told us a few things, and I'm like, well, that's a pretty useful thing. And so I was starting to feel like relatively well versed in small engine repair. So my kid wanted me to fix the other go-kart, but I didn't have time because I was taken off to Panama. I spent a couple of weeks in April in the jungle in Panama. We were in the Darien Gap, which is like you drive to the end of the road and then you stop, and then you get on like a dugout canoe and you go like 6-8 hours in. And there's a community out there of believers that are all getting together for Easter for this amazing conference. And I was joining them, but I was thinking, I was really sad that I didn't get to fix Jay's other go-kart before I left. And so I was actually getting the Jesus film running there. They had some old projectors that were damaged, and I mean that's really where I can work. So I was trying to solder with a rebar. That didn't work very well. But we finally got this projector up and running, and we're all watching the Jesus film, and we're about halfway through. We're getting to the really good part. If you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic movie. And this guy comes in, he taps on my shoulders, and he's like, "Hey, Technico." And that's just what they call me. Okay, he says, coming out, he says, we're leaving in 20 minutes in these dugout canoes, and we don't have any lights up at the church. I need you to fix this for me. And we walk outside, and what's in the yard? Small gas generator. He says, it doesn't run. Can you fix it? I'm like, well, do you have any tools? It's like, no. He says, and so I looked around, and we actually found a 10-millimeter wrench, and a twist tie. And so we were able to clean out the carb. I cleaned out the jet. The 10-millimeter wrench was exactly the right size to take all the rest of the pieces off. And it still wasn't running right. And I'm like, wait a second. Adjusted the air idle screw. Boom. Thing started up right away. And then it died. It started up right away, and then it died. It's like, okay, we got one more thing that we didn't do here. And so me and the president of the church association, we sat down and we prayed over it. We fired it up. He reached over, adjusted the choke a little bit, and the thing ran. And so that night, we had lights in the church, 6 hours down the road away from electricity. And we had lights because of this small generator was going. And I just thought, man, I can't take any credit for that. Like this is all God working, right? That there's this thing that you guys probably already know. You've probably already seen in your life. And that we'd seen a number of times again and again and again. Be it from our own oddness that God had prepared us with. Be it to these professional skills that he invested in us and given us time to develop. Or the small engines that you get to fix with your sons. That God is going to use every skill he's prepared you with. Right? Because he prepared you for a reason. And what's that reason? The reason is to do the good work that he has prepared. God prepares the work, and he prepares you to do the good work that's going to get through the kingdom. So your good work might not look like mine, but God has prepared you uniquely to do the amazing good work that he has prepared already ahead of time for you. Isn't that an amazing thing to think of? When we walk through life, all these opportunities that God is actually putting in front of our path that we might not even think we're prepared for. We might even think we want to do, and then find out this is exactly what God was doing with us. So if you're an engineer, maybe design and build things. If you're a nutritionist, make sure the world's fed food and the gospel. If you're a preacher, preach the word, right? And we know this. Serve this church. Serve it well with all your heart. Volunteer at the thrift store, right? What amazing opportunity you guys have. Maybe come volunteer to be a missionary at Sunset, right? You live right here in town. Come on over. We'll have work for you. If it's in your heart, then God's prepared you for it already. So don't worry about that. Or maybe not us, maybe World Missionary Press, Faith Mission, Retta, right? Some of these amazing ministries that we have around here. Or partner financially with these missions, right? Or like I said, maybe partner with missionaries like us, or whoever else is on your heart. These are opportunities we can do. And here's something we can all do, right? We can all pray, right? Grab our prayer card. Keep us in mind. And really, when we read Philippians 2:2, right, what does it say? Let's flip over there. You guys want to read it together with me? Go on in your Pew Bible, page 1827. There you go. Well, let me step back so I can read the translation you guys too, okay? You want to do this together? So, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and in purpose, right? We get to make the Lord's joy complete. Isn't that crazy? Right? And we get to make Paul's joy complete, like he said there, right? This is ridiculous stuff that we get to do, right? That he's prepared us for, right? And we get to do it together. We are a big C church, right? We're not just a little C church here, right? We're part of this group of Christians around the world that has to bring the kingdom come, right? I mean, that's been tasked with that. And you look and you're like, God, you are prepared and you are skilled and you're able to do that, but how are we? But we see this and we're like, no, God has prepared that for us to do and has prepared us to do it, right? So the last exhortation here, and this is something that you need to remind me of all the time because I forget it, but that these are good works that he's prepared for us, but do it for God, not for man, right? Not for you and not for somebody beside you. If we read Matthew 6:33, right, we see, but seek first what? His kingdom, right? And his righteousness, right? And if we do that, what will happen? All of these things will be added onto you. Okay. So, are we ready to do that? I am. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. 1, 2, 3, break.